Now that the OHL final has wrapped up, I can now wrap up this series looking at the teams and how they did over the 2023-24 OHL season and what we can expect from these teams going into next year. And we're down to the last two teams. We're going to start off with the Oshawa Generals, who had an incredible finish to the regular season, going all the way to the Ontario Hockey League final, where not many people had expected them to go. So where do the Generals go from here? Well, let's look at how the season went. First of all, it was a team that was expected to maybe be middle of the pack, maybe challenging for home ice advantage come playoff time in the Eastern Conference. They were 5-5 in their first 10 games of the regular season, and injuries a big factor with this team. And you may remember there's the big injury involving Ethan Toms, where he took a skate to the face, needing 100 stitches. It was a gruesome scene. It was a game against the Peterborough Petes, but Tom's, of course, able to come back later in the regular season. Plus, Callum Ritchie, the Colorado Avalanche prospect, he didn't join the Generals lineup until the middle of November. So injuries were an issue, and it just seemed as though the team was trying to find their way in an East Division that appeared to be wide open, considering the Peterborough Petes had the early lead at the start of the regular season. But it was a trade with their historic rivals, the Peterborough Petes, that seemed to turn the season around as soon as they got healthy. And that was, of course, picking up Connor Lockhart. He was an overager on the Peterborough Petes. They had 4 overagers at the time. They needed to reduce their number, and the Oshawa Generals more than willing to take the experienced forward who would prove to be a valuable asset come playoff time. And after that trade, they started getting healthy, and they just went off on a run from there. So he picked up actually 52 points in 45 games with the Oshawa Generals. Before that trade, he was a point per game player with the Peterborough Petes, and it just seemed as though going to Oshawa really helped his game during the regular season. So a solid addition there. And then at the OHL trade deadline, when the team was starting to pick it up even more, they added defenseman Connor Punnett from the Barrie Colts and Zachary Sandu from the Guelph Storm, and that was it. They didn't buy in too heavily. They went for the pieces that they knew they needed and went from there. And really, from the trade deadline on, they're getting some amazing goaltending from Jacob Oster, and then they ended the regular season on a 12-game winning streak and took first place in the Eastern Conference on the final game of the OHL regular season. It was a big win at home against the Sudbury Wolves that clinched first spot in the East. And then going into the playoffs, it was a bit of a rocky start. They played the Barrie Colts in the opening round, and Barrie gave them everything they could handle. The series ended up going 6 games, but it seemed to give them some confidence as they would sweep Ottawa in the second round of the playoffs. They were up 3-0 in the Eastern Conference final against North Bay before injuries started to become an issue. The Battalion, they came back to force a Game 7, but the Oshawa Generals, in the end, would be your Eastern Conference champions. They would go to the OHL final, and it was a lopsided final. I'm sure for Oshawa fans, it's something they want to put behind them relatively quickly, as they were outscored 31-9 in those 4 games against the London Knights. But outside of that, this is a team that can be proud of where the organization is at going forward, because Oshawa exceeding expectations and going on an unlikely run is some pretty exciting stuff. And I think for next year, this is going to benefit them going into next season. Don't be surprised if we're talking about Oshawa as one of the top teams in the Ontario Hockey League next season. Let's look at the top 10 scorers in the playoffs for Oshawa. Leading the way, Callum Ritchie. What a playoff he had. 8 goals, 22 assists, good for 30 points. Dylan Robrick, he was a beast out there for Oshawa. Second in team scoring, 11 goals, 15 assists, 26 points. The New York Rangers have a solid prospect in Dylan Robrick. Beckett Seneca, he was third in scoring, 10 goals, 12 assists, good for 22 points. It was unfortunate that he suffered an injury late in the playoffs. He missed Game 6 and 7 I think it was just Game 7 for Oshawa in the Eastern Conference Final, and then did not appear in the OHL Final. So a tough situation there for Beckett Seneca, but still ended up third in team scoring. Connor Lockhart, 9 goals, 9 assists, 18 points. Luca D'Amato had a great run in the postseason. The defenseman ended the playoff run, 5 goals, 8 assists, 13 points. Luca Morelli, 2 goals, 11 assists, 13 points. Stuart Rolovs, the captain, put it all on the line, ended the playoffs with 5 goals, 6 assists, 11 points. Rasmus Kumpalainen, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points. And then Ben Danford, he was ninth in team scoring with 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points. And Matthew Buckley suffered an injury late in the playoffs as well. Ended the postseason with 4 goals, 3 assists, good for 7 points. So really, you look at that depth, and this Oshawa Generals team doing a great job. And you have to give credit to the coaching staff getting the best out of this lineup and being rewarded with a run to the OHL championship. In net, Jacob Oster, he led the way. 12-6-3 was his record in the playoffs. 3.26 goals against average, 895 save percentage. So obviously that series against the London Knights really taking a toll on his playoff stats. But remember, he was named the OHL goaltender of the year. So I know that the numbers didn't look great in the final against London, but still, Jacob Oster, a solid goaltender since coming over in a trade last year from Guelph. And then Noah Bender, he appeared in 3 games in relief, 4.28 goals against average, and an 844 save percentage. Graduating overagers this year, that includes Connor Lockhart, Stuart Rolovs, and of course Connor Punnett. All 3 of those guys were Warriors in the playoffs for this Oshawa Generals team. And then when you look at the overage candidates for next season, this is where it gets really interesting. You've got Luke Torrance, Dylan Robrick, the New York Rangers prospect, Luca D'Amato, and Jacob Oster. That's it. 4 candidates for OA, which means there is a lot of returning players next year for this Oshawa Generals team that just developed so much experience on that run. And that's why I say the Oshawa Generals have to be an early favorite going into next season for the East Division and Eastern Conference. This is going to be a team that I think is going to be able to keep up with the Steelheads, with the Brantford Bulldogs, another team that should be good next year. But the Oshawa Generals, I do like where this team is right now on paper. My only concern, though, for Oshawa going into next season may be Beckett Seneca. He's expected to be a first-round draft pick in the NHL draft next month, but depending on who drafts him and where, there's been some speculation that he could go in the top 5. Montreal, they have that number 5 pick. Do they go for Beckett Seneca? And if that's the case, does he stick around in the NHL? And then we have a similar situation with what the Guelph Storm went through last year with Matthew Poitras. Does Beckett Seneca come back? And if they're missing the services of a player like Beckett Seneca, how's that going to impact this team? Is it going to take a step back? How's it going to affect their goal scoring? Because I think Beckett Seneca, if he comes back to the OHL next year, he is going to have a huge season offensively. And I think he should be in the OHL next year, but still, you got to have that in the back of your mind. If he's picked in the top 10, we've seen that before with OHL players who get selected. They end up staying in the NHL, and then it affects the chemistry, and then there's all the question marks about will they come back after the World Juniors at the trade deadline. But even if Seneca does stay in the NHL, I think this Oshawa Generals lineup is still very solid. But we'll have to wait and see. But that's how I see it from the booth. A lot of optimism going forward for the Oshawa Generals after an exciting season. Unfortunate end there in the OHL final, but still, Oshawa fans have to be pretty excited. So let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts on the Oshawa Generals. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.